Chiefs. The 49ers, a disastrous 44-23 loss, drops them to 3-4 in the season. I've got a new guest, a very intelligent one as well. Jonnydels, he's hot. He's got his own channel. So if you guys are from there, that's cool. But we're on after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And as I said before the intro, I've got a very special guest today. I've got Jonnydels. He hosts his own football kind of, what is it about? Is it kind of like a film review kind of channel over there as well?
Yeah, so most of what I do are film breakdowns and reviews of the weekly games or anything that, storylines that might be people might be interested in as far as from a scheme or coach's film perspective, breaking it down.
Yeah, and you heard it there. I've watched a couple of his things. I know that he has a very good sense on the 49ers playbook and just in general about football. So those of you guys that aren't in tune with Jonnydel and his football knowledge, be sure to check out his channel because he's definitely one of the good content creators that is able to break it down for a lot of fans. But Johnny, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing, my man?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. You know, I put my phone away last night after the game. I needed a break. I think we all know how the Twitterverse gets and how the content creator world gets, or just the 49ers fan base gets after a game like that. And so I decided to play with my kids, turn the phone off, and got a good night's sleep.
Okay, a healthy way to end that day. That's a good way. That's a good way to end the day, as opposed to how many took it after a pretty disastrous 44-23 loss. Before we get started, got to give a shout out to everybody who's popped in the comment section. Mariah, thank you always for tuning in. None. That's a very interesting name. But Jonnydel season is here, baby. Yeah, you ain't wrong. And then CJ Gray as well. He's got a very interesting thought. I got to see how this is positive anyway. Stay tuned for the remainder of the show. But we can't start positive because that's not how yesterday went, unfortunately. I gotta ask you, what are your kind of initial takeaways from this pretty bad loss to one of the best teams, if not the best team in football?
You would like to see the team be more competitive. I mean, and that might be an understatement. But when I was severely disappointed in the defense. The way that the Niner kind of world goes right now is when in doubt, blame the quarterback, right? Um, I was so very disappointed in the defense. When you start looking into some of the numbers, somebody shared the defensive EPA, and it was the second worst performance since 2000. Um, that's bad. When you look at some of the horrible teams we've had, I think I look back on like all the Jim O'Neill defenses we had, and how bad those were, and they were graded worse than that. That's bad. When you give up basically 7 straight scoring drives, that's bad. I mean, the
Yeah,
only reason they didn't was because the Chiefs ran out of time before before
before
the
the
end of the
half.
half
Yeah.
and had a touchdown taken back from a penalty, and then Butker misses a chip shot. Like, that's the only reason it wasn't 47-23. Um like, that's bad. Uh and and so there's no way to look at it from the defensive side and say that was nothing but bad. And from the offensive side, there was very few positives to look at.
Right.
One thing, I mean, the offensive line was not great. And that's being gentle, especially in pass protection. I mean, um,
It's been kind of the
their
flip
pass.
side in the past weeks, no? Like the run blocking hasn't necessarily, it's not that it's been up to par or hasn't been up to par, but hasn't been as good as you'd expect. And the pass protection has been good. Kind of the flip side this week.
Yeah, I would say, with the exception of Atlanta, I felt like Atlanta, the
Mhm.
pass pro was a problem, mainly because we weren't able to just get the ball out quick. When Kyle Shanahan starts protecting his tackles, he starts really trying to get the ball out quick. When you can't do that, then that becomes a problem. What
Yeah.
I saw just from the game from watching the broadcast was that the Chiefs were playing a lot of press man. One reason teams do that is so that you disrupt the timing and you hold up the you cause the quarterback to hold the ball just a little bit longer. The idea is that then if you can get home, then you're good. It's kind of a risk reward defense. If you can hold them up, jam them up enough, and your line can get there, then that offense is going to have a lot of problems, and that's part of what we saw. Um, and I haven't seen all the film. I've watched about the first 3 drives of the film is
Mhm.
all I got through this evening of when it dropped. So I can't speak to exactly what the issues on whether that's Jimmy not getting the ball out on time, whether that's receivers not separating on time, whether that's Kyle's play calling for longer developing stuff, whatever it is, there was a problem with pass protection. We have to be able to run the ball more consistently. I mean, it was doing okay, but you needed to have fewer of those 1 yard gains, 0 yard
Yeah.
gains. Um, and I see CJ is saying that RG3 is slamming Jimmy again. I have some problems with RG3 having some takes here just because of his history with Kyle Shanahan.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because
you're right.
he's had some negative things to say about anybody who doesn't seem to blow the lid off with Kyle Shannon's office. And I want to go, well, RG, who are you to talk about that? But anyways, the offense was not great, but I think we're overlooking how bad the defense was. Um, I don't know if I've ever seen such a poor defensive effort by a 49ers team. Like I can't remember the one game that was graded worse. So, I mean, it was bad.
Yeah, I mean, you put it out clearly there. The defense did not play that great. And I think when many people, I think yesterday was interesting. Many people on Twitter debated about the offense in a way, at least because they knew how horrific the defense was. So at least the offense provides some form of debatable behavior. So that's where a lot of the focus was. But in reality, yeah, this was a porous defensive performance for many who believed that this defense was the number one defense in the NFL. And to make matters worse, what happened last week? The Buffalo Bills held this exact team to 20 points. They were able to consistently hold them to 20 points. And when their offense sputtered, they only scored 24 last week. When their offense sputtered, their defense held up. In comparison, this 49ers defense did not hold up. They allowed 44 points. They couldn't get a really they didn't get a clean stop, right? That first the interception on the first drive was really their cleanest stop. Then the Chiefs scored touchdowns on the ensuing 2 drives, and then like you said, the touchdown nullified by penalty really forced them to miss out on an opportunity at the end of the half. And so they had several opportunities to try and make plays, especially on those third and longs. And it just seemed like Andy Reid had D'Amico Ryans' number the entire night. When you look at it offensively, in a way, Kyle Shanahan, I thought, tried to trust his tackles in this game. Why? Because to match the Chiefs and their explosive play and big play ability, there were some of those plays that were longer to develop. You need to trust your tackles to be able to hold and give Jimmy Garoppolo pressure, give Jimmy Garoppolo enough space for him to be able to allow those routes to develop and then hit his targets. Yes, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't do a great job when those opportunities were present at times, but also he was put in positions where there was too much pressure and sometimes pressure to overcome. Garoppolo does have to play better. I think the entire fan base knows that,
Right.
and I think that is somewhat overstated just because it's a fact. He normally does have to play better for this team to win, but also there are drops by the offense. There are inconsistencies. There are a significant amount of second and nine, second and eight, second and sevens where the 49ers then have to erase a part of their game plan because you don't want to run and make it third and seven against one of the most uh, one of the best teams in terms of delivering pressure. See Spagnuolo, it's not like his defense is predictable, but they are damn aggressive. He will trust whoever is out there on an island. They played rookie cornerbacks against Buffalo last week. They got torched at times, but they still held. They still were only able to score 20 points, right? And so he'll trust his guys on an island, and he will send pressure. We saw so many cover zero blitzes yesterday, and that's the team. It's unfortunate the 49ers were not able to overcome what was thrown at them.
Absolutely. And when it's kind of like Ayuk said, there's certain things that you're not necessarily practicing in practice, like 1st and 20.
Right.
How many again back-to-back weeks we've had big time passing plays get taken off the
Negated by
board
penalty.
from penalties. I remember we had a big pass to Ayuk. Again, it was Ayuk, or it was Ayuk or Debo in the game that got pulled back. McGlinchey was called for
Yeah.
holding. You can't keep it's like the theme in the other 3 losses that I showed in my videos was when the team starts stacking back on bad. That was a theme in Denver. You saw it's not just one play. It's not just one player. It's not just one thing here. It's when you stack those things on top of each other. A good example would be when Ray McLeod, the Chiefs just score a touchdown. They kick it off. We had a chance to start coming back. We had made it 23-28. Then they score again, make it 35-23. They kick the ball off. It goes into the end zone, 5 yards deep into the end zone. That should just be a touchback. But what does Ray McLeod do? He says, I'm going to make a play.
Takes it out.
And so he brings it out of the end zone. And then, so that's a bad mistake. Okay. So you have bad. And then you have a holding penalty called at the 10-yard line because you're pulling it out of the end zone 5 yards deep.
Right.
And now you're set up at 1st and 10 from your own 5-yard line. Bad. Now you stack bad on bad. And then you have your tackles whiffing on a block. So now you have bad on bad on bad. And Jimmy doesn't get the ball out quickly up against the end zone and you get a safety. You're stacking bad on top of bad on top of bad on top of bad. It's not one player. It's not one thing. It's multiple things that get stacked. It's you're coming out of that. You have a chance to take the lead before the half. You throw a bad pick on the ends at the goal line. You have bad. And then you give up, and 70 yards, a 70-yard drive almost. So
in
they
1 minute and 22 seconds.
In 1 minute 22. Now, thankfully, it didn't score. They didn't cost points, but you have a chance to be up before the half. Now you're down by 1 point. Then you're saying, okay, we're gonna regroup at a halftime, and on the ensuing kickoff, you give up a 49-yard kickoff return, and then at the end, so you have bad. And then at the end of that kickoff return, Juwan Jennings pushes a guy when he's two yards out of bounds. And now you get a 15-yard penalty. So that's bad on bad. Okay. You can't make problems worse. You can't sit there and take a bad play and add even more to it. Because now your defense, who hasn't been able to stop the Chiefs pretty much the whole game, is now the Chiefs are starting their drive at your own 35-yard line. They are already in field goal position. You can't do those things. You can't do that's what bad teams do. That is a sign of bad teams. We don't want to believe we're a bad team. I don't want to believe we're a bad team. I think, we have enough talent to where we're not a bad team, but you're making bad team mistakes. You can't just keep doing that. You can't keep digging yourself a hole. The one thing I said at the end of the video last week after looking at the Atlanta Falcons film was that at some point the team has to put down the shovel. Like at some point you have to stop stacking bad things on top of each other. And you just see it the whole game.
Yeah, and I think that that's really a great way to analyze it, right? You can point to just one example in a way last week that really killed the game for the 49ers. Brandon Ayuk was running a shot play. He had one-on-one. Jimmy Garoppolo didn't lead him. Ayuk may or may not have been held on a deep pass that ended up becoming incomplete. The next play, the 49ers run a very similar concept where the receiver on the right side is running a crossing route. It was the exact same crossing route that really caused some confusion and led to one-on-one with Ayuk. The cornerback, understanding that crossing route is happening, then doesn't go with Ayuk and instead stays on that crossing route, is able to deflect the high pass from Jimmy Garoppolo to Deebo Samuel, and that ends up in an interception. Now, there are two parts that kind of end in a bad play, right? First, that first play, Garoppolo does have to lead him. That has to be a completion, but it's a tough play nonetheless. Second, the personnel on that play. Willie Snead should not be in. Nobody views Willie Snead as a clear out threat. And Kyle Shanahan has to understand that you can't have those two plays back to back. While Jimmy Garoppolo also has to understand where the defense is on a play and needs to be a little more aware of where he's throwing the football.
Yeah, that was a rough sequence. Because we ran the same play that we had the drop from Ray McLeod on earlier in the
Yeah,
game, that big drop. Now those are usually spot throws, so Jimmy's looking to throw it down to the hash. That if you look at most of the times when we throw those, they'll end up right around the same spot.
yeah,
If when you look at it, one, yes, Jimmy should lead him a little more. That's also a throw that you see a lot of guys around the league, Mahomes included, will throw it just like that. I've
hmm
seen Tyreek Hill, come back, slow up and catch
right.
that
Come
one that's
back
a
to the
little bit
point
off.
and catch that ball at the point.
So
Yeah,
when I look at it, I go, yes, Jimmy should lead him. If it was, blame, I would say 60-40, I'd put it on Ayuk. It's a
hmm
little bit on Jimmy. It's somewhat on Jimmy. I'd say a little more on Ayuk, because if you actually look at how he timed that, he times the jump a little early. He
hmm
goes up to get the ball a little early. That's what clues the corner into that the ball's coming, and he's able to get his hands in there. You'd like to see him, and that's a timing issue. That's,
right.
Ayuk's been running that route with Lance throwing it to him a little bit more on a line for 9 months, pretty much since during the entire offseason when they're working together. Now he's got Jimmy throwing in the ball again, and they haven't done that very much. People can say, well, yeah, these guys played together. Well, yeah, but I mean, when you switch quarterbacks for 9 months, it's not just flip a switch and you go back.
Yeah,
So, but it's the result of missing on those plays when you have the opportunities. You have the big drop by Ray. Now, there's a little bit of timing issue there with him and Ayuk. And now you're having to come back to the well on a similar concept for a third time. Now the defense is ready. You know,
exactly.
that that's where you can't waste those opportunities early, because what happened was we ran a seam to a corner that was supposed to grab both the deep third corner and the deep middle safety,
hmm
and the corner hands it. You can see him. He hands the route off to the safety, who
To the
picks it
safety,
up,
exactly.
and he jumps the crossing route. You can't keep going to the well when over and over and over again on the same sort of plays. Just because it worked 2 times doesn't mean it's going to work the third time. In fact, that's probably where it's not going to work, is because the defense. I mean, these are humans on the other side that are going, well, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. They're figuring it out, and so you have to take advantage of those opportunities when you get them. Um,
Yeah,
and so it's another one. Now that ball should have come out a little bit earlier.
yeah.
I felt like Jimmy took an extra hitch. And so, but he's reading the deep safety, because you're assuming that backside third corner is going to run with the corner route. He ran with the deep route, the 2 plays before that.
The
So,
two plays before, yeah,
um, it's one of those of, it's like we say, bad on bad on bad. You can't miss those first 2 opportunities to try and go to the well and then force the ball in on the third time. That's on everybody. That's on Jimmy. That's on Kyle. That's on Ray. That's on Ayuk. Like, everybody's got a hand in that, and you're seeing so much of that with the team, and particularly on offense. It's frustrating. I think it's frustrating for us when you have an offensive coach to not see the team putting up more points. We
exactly.
want
Offensive
we
coach with the offensive talent, it is frustrating.
Right. Now, I said it during the offseason, before we even knew that Trey was going to get hurt, and that Jimmy was even going to be on the team. People would say, well, I'm expecting this out of Trey. I'm expecting that out of Trey. And I kept saying, I said, this team will go as far as the offensive line takes them. You can have all the skill position players you want. You can have the greatest running back. You can have the great receivers. You can have a phenomenal quarterback. But if that offensive line does not perform at a high level, you will not do well. The best example I can always think of is the Chiefs in the Super Bowl versus the Buccaneers. You know, like, you have a generational talent at quarterback. They got 9 points
hmm
because Mahomes was running for his life. The offensive line was terrible. So what did the Chiefs do? They turned around and they then
They invested in the
rebuild
offensive line.
that entire
Exactly.
offensive line. And look at what happened this past week. We had edge guys that were some of the highest production guys as far as pressure rates.
hmm
We did not get to Mahomes until like the third quarter.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
that's a
that
huge
it's
testament to their
definitely
offensive line.
yeah, and I mean, like you said it, they did it well. They traded for Orlando Brown. They now signed Joe Tooney, who was the highest paid guard at the time, drafted Creed Humphrey. Now I know Andrew Wiley is an iffy kind of part of their offensive line, but overall that's a pretty good infrastructure for their offensive line. And this isn't to say that the 49ers have a bad offensive line. I think that would be
Right.
overstating it. Trent Williams is one of the best, if not the best, at his position. Aaron Banks and Spencer Burford have been positives this year, especially Banks, who's had a pretty solid year. Brendel, he's been up and down here and there. He hasn't really been good in certain aspects. He's had some good games and hasn't had some other good games. And you do wonder how much you can put it on Brendel because he did face Grady Jarrett, right? He faced Chris Jones for a portion of yesterday's game, and Mike McGlinchey. He is another up and down player who has had his moments, who played well in some of those intermediate weeks, but didn't play well this past week and didn't really play well in week one either. So you have some up and down pieces, and the issue with volatility is it doesn't take all five players to fail for one play to not be able to execute. The biggest statement, like I work here with the Wisconsin Badgers, and every week offensive coordinator Bobby Ankrum tells me this. The offensive line works as one. If one player fails on that offensive line, that play is not going to execute. And the issue is more often than not, especially when the 49ers are losing, there's one player on certain plays, especially the longer pass plays that were on second and long, third and long, or whatever it may be, that fails to execute. And as a result, bad on bad on bad starts to happen within that play.
What's interesting to me, and I was thinking about it today, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I know I just from an idea, if you actually look at from the moment like the 49ers record when they got Weston Richburg, when they had him. Okay, remember that 2019 season we had Weston Richburg, and we
Right.
started
Excellent.
out what 8-0,
Mm-hmm.
and those first 12 games we were really good. Then
Mm-hmm.
Richburg goes down. What has our record been since Richburg's gone down?
I'd
Um,
assume it's especially because this was
it's
2019 that no, that record deteriorated, and then 2020. Yeah, it hasn't
and
been that
then
great.
and then 2021, I would assume it's right around 500.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have never been able to solidify that center position. Last year we had
Yeah.
Alex Mack, and again, you see Alex Mack. We go to the NFC Championship game, but we still had lots of struggles. Alex Mack was on his way out of the NFL, right? Yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
mean that in like he's a loser. I mean in that he was
He's
he
35 years
was
old.
he was
He was
35 and
yeah.
had a lot of miles. That wasn't that wasn't 35 and few miles. That was a lot of miles on it. I don't get why center hasn't been a bigger point of emphasis the last couple years because Richburg, they went out and they paid a lot of money for Richburg,
Yeah.
and
Five
that was
years, 47.5 million. They
right.
ate a good amount of dead cap when he got injured, but yeah,
Right.
that's a lot.
And then he had to retire. Kyle center in Kyle's offense is a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize like coverage checks, those or when they have protection checks. So when there's protection checks, that's handled by the center. That's not handled by the quarterback. Those because I remember reading an article from Alex Mack talking about that in 2015 or 16 with Kyle that Kyle likes to have it to where the center is making all the protection adjustments, all the adjustments in the run game, that all that communication, you don't hear it on the screen, but that communication is going along the front. That's up to the center. And the reason he does that is so his quarterbacks can focus more about the fronts and checking into the correct play because Kyle puts so much on the quarterbacks in the run game about checking into the right play. And then also helping to focus on coverages that it takes one less thing off their plate. But since Richburg has gone down, we have not been the same level of team. And so, I just wonder why like Brendel, like you said, he's had he's had a couple okay games. I haven't seen anything that I go, wow, yeah, Brendel.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of, oh dear Lord, Brendel. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very disconcerting, and it's frustrating. I remember I tweeted out after the NFC Championship game of Kyle, please fix the offensive line, because I felt like if you're going to set Trey Lance up for success, you need to have a really good offensive line built around him, and they didn't. I've Banks has been phenomenal. Banks has
Hmm.
been really good. Trent Williams though has been hurt, so we've been missing Trent. Um, we haven't been good since really good since Trent went down.
Yeah,
I feel like he was still coming back from that ankle a little bit. I think that's
definitely
why he got
yesterday.
beat by
Yeah.
Frank Clark. Um, McGlinchey has been McGlinchey. Um, uh, he's a really good run blocker, but God, he's horrible in pass protection. I've never come out of a game and thought, man, McGlinchey really was just a brick wall in pass pro. Never once, and that's what's frustrating. And it's also why I think the run game is so important in Kyle's offense, because these guys are not built to drop back, play pass pro 35, 40 times a game. I will die on that hill. And Jimmy, Trey, Brock Purdy, if Jimmy gets hurt, whoever's in there at quarterback, I will die on that hill of saying you can't expect our offensive line to hold up in pass pro 40 times a game. You just can't.
I
Um,
think that's a fair statement. Yeah. And I mean, here's something that I want to run by you because this is what I think about the Shanahan system and center. It's clear, right, that this offensive line, it doesn't you he doesn't it's not that he doesn't necessarily trust, but in a way he doesn't really prefer to have rookies or younger players operating in that system. Been a change in the recent behavior of Kyle Shanahan to start Spencer Burford at right guard. And in a way, it was to introduce the new wave that the 49ers are having because they are starting to get younger. Their free agent acquisitions this year aren't their normal 1 year deals, 30-year-olds. Instead, it's multi year deals with younger players to try and establish a core at a time in which there are several players. The 49ers have seen so many departures and additions over the last 2 years when trying to be in contention. They're trying this new way to try and keep themselves as an established force when those players eventually leave for bigger deals or whatever it may be. Now, with that said, I don't know if Kyle Shanahan trusts a center enough, especially as a rookie, to incorporate him into the offense come year one. And that's been an issue, I think, because when you look at the free agent market after the Weston Richburg signing, he was done pretty much in 2020 with that neck injury. There's only been really, in my opinion, two big name free agents that have entered the market since then: Corey Linsley and David Andrews. Andrews obviously re-signed with the New England Patriots, and Linsley got a massive 5 year, $62 million deal with the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't think the 49ers would shell out that type of money for a center, even with the importance that they have, which kind of has been the issue because there hasn't been top tier free agent talent. And Kyle Shanahan has been wary about adding that specific position in the draft to the point where he sometimes is even getting other players who've played different positions in college to move them to center because he prefers the versatility of the position.
yeah. I mean, you see, he tends to see guys as like interior linemen and
Mm-hmm.
then swing tackles, and he likes he likes getting a lot of value with his interior linemen. Um, Now, I was really high on Dickinson out of Alabama a couple years ago that the
Yeah.
Eagles picked up. Um, and we see how the Eagles are doing and how good their offensive line looks.
Dickinson he's actually moved to guard, but he's
Right,
still very, very solid.
right.
He's been solid. The guy that obviously I and many others, I'm sure you liked, Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma, has been very solid. And I'm not going to say the 49ers made the wrong pick. Aaron Banks has been what I thought he'd be, and he's playing in technicality a more important position because you kind of do have that layer. But overall, yeah, there have been opportunities for the 49ers
Yeah,
to take that player, and they didn't.
yeah. And even like to go back to your point about rookies, Brendel was switching series with Brunskill last
Mhm.
Sunday. Even with it how good Brendel started out the year, once he's only playing because Brunskill got hurt.
Yeah,
And
and that
and
was the
what
case in training camp. Many
yeah.
people, myself included, I thought that I was at training camp every day. I thought that with how Brunskill was incorporated immediately after he healed back from the injury that was sidelining him in the offseason, he got incorporated straight into it. The issue with Brunskill, he just couldn't snap the football. That was the main issue. He was a better player, but his play was really poor, in my opinion, in training camp. He was one of the one of the guys on the low, and then obviously the hamstring, or I think it was a hamstring that really put him out for the first 5 weeks. That took away any possibility of a change happening.
Yeah, and when you look at Brunskill, I see him very similar to McGlinchey. The guy is a really good run blocker, and he's a guy that he can go pick up a safety in run blocking
Hmm.
15 yards down the field, but he's
Hmm.
bad in pass protection. He got beat several times on Sunday. McGlinchey, same thing. It comes down to Kyle will always wait towards are they a premier run blocker? You have to be a really good run blocker because that's the core of the offense. It's the core of the team. And, I guess if there's a positive side to look out of it is that Christian McCaffrey was having moments of, even with only being with the team and going through
Yeah,
walkthroughs, you could see the potential.
yeah.
So the team is not dead. I mean, every year I feel like, I told somebody about this. Every year I feel like we have a game that we get blown out and we always go, okay, this is our 94 Philly game. Because if I'm a bit older. Were you even alive in 94?
Nope, not a
Oh,
chance.
dear Lord, I feel old. But in 1994, okay, a little history lesson. The last time we won a Super Bowl, Steve Young's quarterback, we got blown out 41, I believe it was 41 to 10 versus the Eagles in that year. And Steve Young got pulled out of the game, very much like this happened to Jimmy in this game. In the fourth quarter, and he exploded on George Seifert on the sideline, was dropping all sorts of things that if they had the mic up from the sideline, it would have had to be bleeped out. You know, but that team then from there went on, rolled, steamrolled through the playoffs, and every year it's like we get blown out and we go, okay, well, this is just our 94 Philly game, where a really good team gets embarrassed and blown out, and then they take off and roll. Every year we're saying that, and it hasn't turned out. But it could be that. This could be that time. This could also be the signs of a team being not as good as we think. I hope that they start really putting it together and figuring it out. The defense is very concerning, mainly because we saw guys getting burned in man coverage so much, like Charvarius Ward.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that was really concerning to me. I don't know if he's just playing tight because he's so badly wants to make a big play against his former team, or if he's expecting the pass rush to get home quicker, and so he's sitting on routes. The Chiefs came in being one of the least explosive Chiefs teams that have been there, that have been around for years. They've been dinking and
Exactly.
dunking their way all season, and all of a sudden, suddenly they're dropping deep shots on us all game long and hitting big explosive plays. Is that the team just wasn't expecting that kind of attack, and they're sitting on routes and they're expecting their passers to get there? Is that just our defense getting exposed? I don't know. That's going to be the question going forward. Is this team, we're going to see this week? This week's going to be big, and through the bye week. We win this week. The West is still wide open. This isn't the end of the
Yeah,
season. This could be a game we look back on and go, well, that was just weird. It could be the game that we look back on and go, well, that's who they ended up being.
yeah,
I think it's going to come down to does the offensive line hold up? Does the defensive lines get healthier and start getting there? And can we establish the run game and explosives in the run game? It's not like we're seeing fronts and coverages that we haven't seen for 5
agreed.
years.
Hmm.
Now we are
You've
seeing
seen this
some.
exact Chiefs defense 3 times in the last couple of years now.
Yeah. And, we are seeing a little bit more of this Fangio style, but that wasn't the Chiefs.
Yeah,
The Chiefs, it was
that's
very
true.
much a Spagnolo. And you do see that some of this Shanahan wide zone scheme around the league is not as explosive league wide. I mean, you're
Hmm.
seeing some of those things like Denver. I mean, Denver's having their own issues, but they're running that same sort of system. Chicago's running that same sort of system. Green Bay's running that same sort of system. Just got beat by the Commanders.
Yeah,
Um,
and the Jets last week too.
and the Jets last week, and the Packers lost to the Giants. I mean, like you're seeing some of these offenses that have been over the past few years really explosive. The NFL is really starting to focus on shutting down that kind of Shanahan system. How do we adjust? How do we go forward? So I don't know if it's easy just to look at, like, Kyle from 2019, 2020, 21, 22, the drop offs. Because I think if you look at a number of those teams, you're going to see some drop offs. Now the Rams will be a little bit of an anomaly just because last year they spiked, but then they're coming back down. Because the thing about the Fangio defense is it allows safeties to do some different things to
Hmm.
help fight against the wide zone. That's the bigger thing that you have. But it's not like, we hadn't seen any of this. It's not like we haven't seen 8 and 9 man boxes before. I
Right.
mean, that's been around in the NFL for 50, 60 years.
And the
Uh,
49ers are seeing it a significant amount, especially in 2022.
Right, and I mean, I think they were going to see that no matter who is at quarterback. When I saw the Texans play us
Oh
last
yeah.
year, I actually saw safeties playing closer, and I saw it. And then it was interesting because Kyle confirmed it in a press conference. He said, actually, because he was asked where the safety, because he said that it took me a little bit to figure out exactly how the safeties were playing, and they said, well, because they were playing deeper, and he said, no, they were actually playing shallower. And you saw that on film because it's to account for Trey in the run
And
game
the
as
running
well.
ability. Hmm.
So Trey was there to help open up the run game against 8 and 9 man boxes. From now he occupies another guy that has to be responsible for him. It's not just throwing the ball deep down the sideline. When I see like cover 3 zone, you don't bust that out by going deep down the sideline. You bust that out by horizontally stretching them over the middle. In the pass game, that forces them to go to safety and to zone and end up putting 5 underneath, that kind of stuff. And then you can start running the ball, and then they go back, and then they go back, and then you hit them on the deep shot. And that's very much what you see with Kyle's offense. That's why it's kind of this, and then you get a every once in a while calculated shot.
Right.
So, it comes down to, can you establish a run? Can you keep it going? Can you keep it productive? Can you keep in third and shorts? We haven't seen that enough. And hopefully Christian McCaffrey brings that kind of secret sauce in. Because, it wasn't like Jeff Wilson was horrible, but I want to see the offensive line be better in run in the run game. You know, they we are not very good at running the ball this year. We just
We
aren't.
aren't. Yeah.
Um,
No, definitely. And I mean, I wrote an article last week on that specific topic on running the football. When you see the efficiency numbers when Trey Lance was in as opposed to Jimmy Garoppolo, it's 2 yards per carry difference. Trey Lance and company ran it for 5.65. This is without Elijah Mitchell, too, who got injured. 5.6 yards per carry. That dropped to 3.8 yards per carry with Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm before this week. And when you look at all the efficiency numbers, we're 29th in EPA with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, 26th in DVOA in terms of running the football with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. And I'm not saying that this is on Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not going to blame
right.
someone when it's not in his skill set. But overall, I felt the run game became predictable because Jeff Wilson Jr. doesn't have the juice to hit the outside zone, making it a predominantly inside zone scheme. And when you have defenders stacking 8 in the box 26% of the time, the third most in the NFL, it's hard to run the football in that unless you have pristine blocking from your offensive line. And when, like I said earlier, when only one person doesn't execute that block, that rush maybe goes from a 4 yard gain to a 1 yard gain, or a 7 yard gain to a 3 yard gain, or a 10 yard gain to, a 5 yard gain. And you have limited opportunities. You need to make sure those count because otherwise those lead to the second and third and longs where you eventually have to get away from the run game as the 49ers have done in weeks past and rely on the pass game, which hasn't been a formula. Like, I'm not going to say, a lot of people have said the 49ers won't win if Jimmy Garoppolo passes more than they run. I don't think that that's true, but it does decrease their chances of winning just because in general, if you are reliant on passing the football, which hasn't been your forte, and gets you into more chances where you are mistake prone, that's an issue for the offense. And we are hoping that Christian McCaffrey does spark a light because he has the inside outside ability. That's why I'm really intrigued to see how this offense rolls with him and Mitchell as the 1-2, because they have the outside and inside capability, which is going to allow Shanahan to get back into the full arsenal of his running back book, while also having two backs that can do a lot after first contact as well.
And like you said, the whole when we have to throw more than we run with Jimmy, Kyle's record is so much. When I think because we're 49ers fans, okay, we get locked into that with the 49ers. When you start looking at Shanahan and Kyle or Mike, when you start looking at their history, that tends to be the truth no matter who their quarterback's been. You look at Kyle with Matt Ryan in 15 and 16 in the Atlanta Falcons. When Matt Ryan threw more than 32 times, they were 13 and 12. Okay, so they were a 500 football team. When he threw less than 13 times, they were 9 and 1. um there was a huge discrepancy between the more they threw, even with Matt Ryan, who was MVP in 2016.
Right.
They were 26th in the league in pass attempts. They were 12th in the league in rushing attempts.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at like the RG3's rookie year, when he won rookie of the year, they were 30th in the league in passing attempts. It was 29th or 30th in the league in passing attempts. They were fourth or fifth in the league in rushing attempts. When you look at the 94 Super Bowl team with Steve Young and Jerry Rice, okay, and you even had Deion Sanders playing wide receiver, like they were 20th, 18th in the league out of 28 teams in passing attempts. They were third or fourth in the league in rushing attempts. We think about that
Mm-hmm.
team as a passing team. They were one of the heaviest run teams in the NFL. When you look at the Broncos in 97, 98, okay, when they won 2 Super Bowls with John Elway, Hall of Fame quarterback. Elway was only completing 60% of his passes those 2 years, and they were 20th and 21st in passing attempts in the league. They were second and third in rushing attempts in the league. This is a run first team. This is a run first offense. It always will be. That is the Shanahan wide zone offense. Like when you look at the years that they were passing the most, it was like with the Texans, and they were not good. Okay, it was with the Browns, and
Right.
they were not good.
Because you're
Um,
playing from behind. In general, you likely are to pass more when you're playing from behind. I mean, that's a
well,
fact. But also with what you just
and
outlined.
yeah, and there's teams that are built to throw the ball. I mean, the Chiefs are going to throw the ball a lot. That's just who they are. Okay, that's Andy Reid. That's Andy Reid in Philly. That's who Andy Reid was. He was. I mean, that was the big complaint on him in Philly when he had Donovan McNabb, was that he was always throwing the ball. They never had a consistent rushing attack. When you look at the Falcons, like when the Falcons, before Kyle got there, it was in 2012 and 2013. They were third in the league in passing attempts. They were 32nd and 28th in rushing attempts. So you look at, that's what the team was. They were built to throw the ball. Kyle comes in, they transition to be a running team. They're one of the heavier run teams in the league and one of the fewest passing teams. Okay. That's who Kyle Shanahan is. Even if the team is built to throw the ball, he's going to want to run that ball.
Yeah.
So I think as Niner fans can get locked into, well, it's because of Jimmy that when we have to throw a lot, it's actually because usually Kyle Shanahan's game plan is not working, and that's a problem. And I'm not saying that we put all that on Kyle Shanahan. I'm saying that's because you somewhere in that game plan. I don't know how many teams will go into a game and they have to throw out their entire game plan midway through the third quarter, and they actually have success.
Hmm.
There's very few teams that are able to do that. And I think that's what you're more seeing it, because you have to remember it's about time on task, time in the meeting rooms, time on the practice field, the plays that, the 60, 70 plays that they've been practicing all week long, all in the meeting rooms all week long. All of a sudden now you're
Right.
throwing 40 of those out and you're saying, guys, we got to now play catch up. I feel like it starts becoming, you now are not, what you wanted to do, you could not impose your will. You could not execute what you needed, and now you're having to make it up. And the reason I say all of that is not in a defense of Jimmy. I don't want people to feel like, it's just like, oh, he just is trying to
Yeah.
defend Jimmy. He's just trying to defend Jimmy, because that's how it all gets taken. And I hate that you even have to qualify that, but it's like, I feel the same way about Trey. Like and I think at some point we have to kind of, as fans, sit back and go, this is the result of of what the offense can be. Now, if the offense is hitting right and it's executing, it can be a phenomenal offense to watch, but it has to get going. And that's why I'm so excited about Christian McCaffrey. when Mike Shanahan with the 49ers had Ricky Waters, it was an explosive, unstoppable offense. When he had Terrell Davis, it was an explosive, unstoppable offense. When you look at when he had Alfred Morris running for 1,600 yards, that was an explosive offense. When he had Devontae Freeman having hit career years with him in 15 and 16, Matt Ryan's winning the MVP. Okay.
Right.
This can take the offense to that next level. There, like you said, it hasn't been the same since Elijah Mitchell went down. Jeff Wilson is a good back. He's a guy who, he's going to be like those Denver Broncos backs that kind of ran through in the early 2000s, where it was like just about anybody was 1,000-yard back. But there was a difference when you had Terrell Davis in there.
Correct. Yeah.
When you had Clinton Portis in there was a difference in that team. That's what you're looking for from Christian McCaffrey. As it goes, I mean, if we can get just what we saw glimpses of, man, it could be amazing. Now the defense has to take their medicine this week. I mean, they were horrible.
Yeah, and when you talk about this offense, I think that's a very intriguing and correct point, right? Everybody talks about how Kyle Shanahan's a mastermind in his scripted plays. That's the plays that are a part of the game plan. The 49ers often are able to work and execute well in those plays. Then when it comes to the unscripted part, and let me clarify this, because I'm not a Kyle Shanahan homer, but I personally believe that Kyle Shanahan's a better coach than many insinuate. And I think his play calling this year has become underrated to the fact to where when the 49ers lose, everybody will just point to the play calling as the reason why the offense stalls. To me, that hasn't been the case. To me, it's been more so execution, but it also comes from when those execution woos start to happen. Guess what? You have to now go into uncharted waters. You have to scrap away a part of your game plan. And so, as you said, to talk back to your analogy, so you talked about how it's like bad on bad. When you fail the execution originally, you've got to go into uncharted waters, which increases the chances of some mistake occurring on one of the 11 fronts on offense with one of the 11 players on offense, which in reality will kill that play. And so I don't think Kyle Shanahan's scheme is an issue.
Well, this is awkward. I feel like I may have lost Rowan there. It's just us. Is somebody in the chat? Is it just us? Can you guys see Rowan there? Hey,
Oh,
hey,
there we
there's
go. I
back.
think, are we good now?
Hey, I think
Perfect.
we're good now. Man, I felt like I was just
Okay.
staring at. Okay, cool.
But what I was talking about with the lack of execution, like good play calling, lack of execution, how it kind of falls on the head coach. Silverado Kev here brings up a good point. Kyle Shanahan can only do so much, and we can only run the ball so much. So, what's the solution to get back on track? What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Well, here's my issue is, one, I'm not as low on Jimmy as a lot of people are. I'm not as high as some people are. I mean, some people act like he's a top 5 quarterback. I also, where I struggle is the superlatives around a good to pretty good quarterback is how do we classify that? What are our expectations of that? What are our how do we describe things like that? What do we think are limitations? Obviously, you would love to see a little bit more explosion from the pass game. There's a lot of things that go into that. We're obviously seeing, Jimmy has made some of the best throws we've seen him make in his career, especially deep down the field. It's hard for me to look at the Atlanta game and say that quarterback was the problem there. When you're having drop passes and holding calls on explosive plays, I have a hard time, while Twitterverse may say well, we need a different quarterback. And my response is, well, didn't we spend 3 first-round picks to get a different
To
quarterback?
get a different quarterback, yeah,
So what's the complaint? You got what you wanted. He's on IR. So it's that. We've also seen that in the past, offensive production hasn't been a major problem, as far as like over the aggregate. I'm not saying you can look at specific games, and obviously Jimmy's had some games he struggled in. That I mean, to deny that would be just to deny reality.
yeah,
The other side is to say that Kyle Shanahan is just extremely limited by Jimmy. Um, I don't I don't know how you could say he's extremely limited by Jimmy, when we've seen stretches where they're completing 70% of their passes, and you're seeing yards per attempt are high. Those things speak to that. Obviously it can work. And when you look at the offensive film, you don't see, it's not like you're sitting there seeing like, god, there's so many big opportunities that we're just missing, or so many opportunities where this team could go. It's like it just feels like they're off, and there's this play, and there's so many third and longs that we end up in.
yeah,
That's what we have to remember. No team, unless you're the Chiefs against us last Sunday, um, no team's going to be converting third and longs at a really high rate. Jimmy can have stretches where he can make some phenomenal throws, and he can fit things into tight windows. He can also have stretches where he makes really bad decisions. To say it rises and falls all on his shoulders, I would say no. To say, is Kyle hamstrung by Jimmy? I would say no. Is it that Jimmy is getting more out of Kyle's offense than Kyle is baking into the cake? No.
yeah.
That's not who he is. But I've also always, just full disclosure, I've always had a view of the quarterback position that is a little bit different than what we're seeing from a lot from the NFL over the last 3-4 years. I've always looked at it as that, yes, it's great to have guys that can make things happen off script, but you have, to me, longevity in the NFL, long-term production in the NFL is about exhausting the play that's there. And it's about producing within the system. When you look at guys like Terry Bradshaw, Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, those were all guys who executed within their offensive
Correct,
systems.
correct.
Okay, you're talking about a ton of Lombardi trophies with that. So to say that a quarterback who can only be successful within their coach's system is not necessarily saying that then that quarterback's going to be really, really limited, and that you have to have the off script, you have to have the off schedule. I think we've fallen in love with the off schedule and the off script because of Mahomes,
Because of
because
a
of
new wave
Josh
of
Allen,
quarterbacks, right? Yeah,
because of Lamar Jackson. But when you look at, even over the last 10 years, who has won more Super Bowls than anybody over the last 10 years? It's been the the most statue non off script quarterback we've
Tom
seen.
Brady. You've
Right.
seen Nick Foles win one. You've seen
Right.
Joe
You
Flacco beat us even.
you saw Peyton Manning
Yeah,
win, like none of these guys were going to be big off script guys ever. Okay. So I look at it and I go, yeah, we are seeing some of this, but to say that you have to have that, the history of the NFL says you don't. Now
right.
we can get into that. Even if you look at the two quarterbacks who were there in the Super Bowl last year, it was two quarterbacks who were working mainly within their systems, their offensive systems.
Hmm.
Um, what I would and so when people talk about Trey, this comes back to Trey. That's what I want to see when he's in there. I want to see him execute the system really, really well. Because if you put that with Kyle and executing the system, man, fantastic. If you get some off schedule and stuff, cherry on top. But
Right.
don't trade execution within the system for off schedule. We're seeing the Broncos with that right now, right? That
Correct.
that
Correct.
eventually that ability to do off schedule, it goes away. So do you have something else with that? With Denver, Russell Wilson never had anything different than the off schedule and the moon ball. That was it. And we're seeing how limited he is with that. What made Patrick Mahomes so tough this last Sunday wasn't the off schedule. He was dicing us up. That was not who Patrick Mahomes was 4 years ago.
Mhm.
You're seeing this is a guy who is developing as a guy to execute the offense at a really high level. That's who I hope Trey becomes. I'm not looking for the big off schedule. So when it comes to um, you know, uh when you see that, and I get it, when you're winning it's great, when you're not winning it's good, or it's not so good. But again, no team ever plans on saying, okay, we're gonna plan to be down by 6 points, by
You're
eight
right.
points in the fourth quarter. No team is planning for that. Now you have to be able to overcome that. I agree. You do have to be able to overcome that. But generally, in people always point to Kyle Shannon's record of when he's trailing in the fourth quarter. Look how bad the record is. Okay, I get that. Then think about the rest of his record and think about how good is his record when it's close when you get to the fourth quarter. If it's a fourth if team so think about when you're a team coming to face them, you're going to look at that record and you're going to say, if we have not put them away by the fourth quarter, this is bad news for us. They're going to wear us down. So it's about Kyle wants to run the ball 30 times. I mean, he does. That's the goal. That is the goal every week. That'll be the goal with Trey. That'll be the goal with everything. So, to me, when it comes to this offense, the system's got to get executed. And that's on Kyle. I mean, to figure out how that's on the
Correct.
position coaches to get the execution up to a higher level.
No, I agree, and that goes over to the overarching point where while the players aren't executing up to par currently in every single game, really, even in the wins, they haven't been executing up to the standard that you hope they can reach for them to get their potential. It does fall on the head coach and the coaching staff as a result, because those problems are now recurring. Why are they recurring? That's up to the head coach to figure out and to find a way to devise a solution in which those execution issues no longer exist. That's up to Kyle Shanahan, and that's why I think it's imperative the 49ers have this early bye week this year. Last year it was a pretty late bye week. This year now it's a pretty early bye week, I believe in week 9, which is going to be helpful because this is a good time to regroup. And I don't want to look too far. The Rams game is going to be extremely important because of the division. I think honestly there's a good chance that the NFC West only sends one team to the playoffs this year. There's a chance that that
Yeah.
happens, which means that you're going to have to win every single division game possible. They've beaten the Rams before, they've beaten the Seahawks this year, but this next game is going to give you the ultimate tiebreaker over the Rams in head to head, which is going to be important if there is a tiebreaker at the end of the year. Remember, the 49ers, how did they make the playoffs last year? It was a three-way tie until week 18, and until week 17, and they got in because of their conference record and their division record. Those two are the most important things. This Chiefs loss sucks, but the Rams game next week is the most important game they face this year because it's going to give them first place, or at least close to first place, being depending on what Seattle does in the division, and gives them the up on the tiebreaker in that game. But overall, what I'm trying to say is it's important that the 49ers regroup and figure out a way to get back on track, not only offensively, but defensively after this performance, because of the execution issues that have wooed them this entire year. And when I talk about execution, a lot of people will point to Jimmy this, Jimmy that. And I'm not a Jimmy Garoppolo homer. I don't think he is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think he's just the epitome of average, somewhere in that 16 to 20, somewhere in that range, somewhere around there, however you want to rank it. But
Depends on the
there
week.
depends on the week. Yeah,
Depends on the week. He could be 12, he could be 22.
exactly. But overall, Jimmy Garoppolo this year has shown, it's not that he's a different quarterback, but he has shown an ability to change a little bit. And what do I mean by that? Week 3 was honestly one of his worst performances in a 49er uniform in my opinion. That's how I graded it. I gave him a D. I've never given him a D before in his performance. But after that, I've seen him hit throws that he consistently chose not to throw, those same reads, those 20-yard hitch routes to Ayuk over the middle of the field as the first progression. I've seen him hit that progression, and as a result, you've seen that connection starting to brew over the last few weeks. That's progression from Garoppolo that I haven't necessarily always seen, and that's a good sign. And if the 49ers can start to get it together. But now you need your quarterback to execute within the system, as you said, but you also need your receivers to make plays, because this offense isn't an explosive play offense. It's an offense that gradually builds until you can hit that explosive play. But if the 49ers can't capitalize when that explosive play is called and is set up very well from Kyle Shanahan, then guess what? You're back to step one. You have to reintegrate that part in your offense a little later. Otherwise, it might be bad play after bad play, which is why it's imperative the 49ers execute more often than a team like the Chiefs, who have the explosive playability on any given play, because it's not against Garoppolo, but it's not what their personnel currently is, and it's not what the focus of this team currently is. They want to run the football, they want to grind down on opposing teams, and they want to make sure that they dominate things like time of possession. They want to make sure that they dominate the control of the game, and that's how this team is work. That's how this team works, and that's why they struggle when they get behind.
Exactly. And I've seen so much made about the lack of downfield passing. A buddy of mine did a study a number of years ago, or kind of a couple of years ago, on Steve Young in Mike Shanahan's offense in 1994, and found that over 85% of Steve Young's passes in 1994 were 15 yards and shorter. And we think about, again, historic 49ers teams with Jerry Rice, Brent
Terrell Owens,
Jones.
yeah,
Terrell wasn't there in 94 yet.
not 94, yeah,
But I mean, that offense through the whole way. And what you look at, especially when you start really looking at, how Bill Walsh, the father of the West Coast offense, did everything. He had what he used the boxing analogy a lot, because he used to be a boxer. And so he would talk about, it was punch, counter punch to set up your counter punch. And then after you'd done this a number of times back and forth, then you set up the knockout shot. That he was very much into setting up the way you attack, and then he would go for the big shot. That's how very much how Bill Walsh's offense was that we look back on that offense it was such a great offensive team, but they didn't take the deep downfield shots a lot, like you would think they would. It was just about, they were known as a finesse team. It was dink and dunk, run this, run that, dink and dunk, run this, run that, and then they would take a big shot. Um, you know, that's very much how Kyle's offense is, and it's going to be what you saw in the Houston game last year with Trey would be a perfect example of that. We were sitting there, run, small short pass, run, short pass, and then we hit the big shot. Okay, that's the knockout shot that you're setting up. That was Kyle Shanahan with Matt Ryan in 2016. Matt Ryan averaged 4 deep shots a game. That was it. We think about Matt Ryan like he
but
was
he
like
was efficient and it
it was it
worked. Yeah,
was it was well, and Matt Ryan was hitting those shots at the highest rate he has ever hit them in his career. And the
correct.
reason why, again, because it was all set up. And so it's that's part of this offense. That's how we're going to be. And I feel like when people start banging their head and saying, this is because we have Jimmy, it's because we have Jimmy, I feel like you're going to be frustrated when Trey's in there. And you're going to say, well, why? Then you're going to be saying, why isn't our coach using him like other people? And I go, well, I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the offense. What we need to be going forward, if we look at where this team needs to be, it needs to get a hold of its identity again. They remember Kyle was in a headspace of designing the offense around having Trey, and in a headspace of designing game plans
Right.
around Trey,
Around that
and
zone
using
read that
and
was
and
so
using
vital in those first 2 weeks.
right, and that being baked in, and that is so many of your counters, and your offensive line and your receivers are all baked in with the timing now of zone read play action and zone read bootlegs and all this stuff. And now he's having to been rebuilding his offense with a quarterback who did not make any throws in any mini camp, any OTAs, any training camp. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be problems along the way. And, can we weather through it? Can we get through the bye week and be 4-4? To me, I think I put it out there on Twitter last week. I said, if we were going to be 4-4 at the bye week, it's more important that we beat the Rams. While it sucks to lose the way we did, if we were going to lose one of these 2 games, the better one is to the Chiefs. I mean, like you said, that doesn't have near the playoff implications that one against the Rams does. Who knows what's going to be happening there in Arizona it could be worse. We could have our Jimmy could be running to the sideline, cussing out our head coach, dropping F-bombs to him, telling him to calm down. And then your coach having clauses in his contract about not playing video games. That could be worse. The Rams look like, they're paying for all of the first round picks they traded away.
Yeah,
If if I'm a 49ers fan, like, because I am, I have more reason to be optimistic about the 49ers making a push at the end of the season than I do the Rams. Um,
correct. Just because of the
so
infrastructure of the teams. Yeah,
right, and so while it can be doom and gloom, I do think that this team still can make a big push. We were in the same place last year. The NFC West is wide open, and you look, the NFC North is not really cooking. The NFC South isn't really cooking. It's the NFC East is surprisingly got a couple really good teams, but the NFC is wide open. There's gonna be 7 teams that go into the playoffs. It would be a shame if we miss the playoffs. I don't see that happening. It's about, to me, yeah, we got some bumps. If we're hitting our stride in December, that's when it counts. There's some
yeah,
bumps now. Get right, get things together, iron it through. Winning's a good deodorant. There's a lot of things stinking up because you're losing, but winning's a good deodorant.
if the 49ers won this game, nobody would be talking about any of the mistakes that happened. Not that terrible Garoppolo interception, nothing. They would be praising Kyle. They would be praising. It's just how Twitter and just really how winning goes.
Yep. So, in the end, we can fret and worry, but I'm not really that worried about this season. It's
Yeah,
more, can we enjoy certain spaces as fans? That's just kind of where I'm getting to. Is like, not everything has to be about our quarterback. Can we talk
yeah.
about something else for a little while?
And so to end today on a positive note, going back to something you said earlier, I think that's how Christian McCaffrey is going to be so important to this offense. So many people were questioning, did the 49ers give up too much? Was Christian McCaffrey a bad acquisition? And me, I haven't necessarily been on point with some of the other moves that 49ers have made before. I mean, I've been on record saying some are bad, some are good. But a lot of people this offseason wanted Chandler Jones. A lot of people wanted Stephon Gilmore, players like that. I didn't believe that those were the right acquisitions for the 49ers because of the infrastructure of how their roster is. I didn't think a 32-year-old corner was the best solution for the future. In my opinion, they got the best option on the market in Charvarius Ward. What I'm going to is McCaffrey in this offense is vital because now you have your running game that can be reestablished. This running game has been the key solution to how this offense rolls. And the past 5 weeks without Elijah Mitchell, without Trey Lance, this running game has taken a huge hit because it's not only has it become in a way predictable, and that's not on Shanahan, it's just because of the personnel. Not only has it become predictable, it's become one dimensional because you're utilizing one player as a bell cow back. And so, in an article that I wrote about McCaffrey last week, I referenced the 2019 version of the 49ers. The reason being Raheem Mostert, Matt Breida, Tevin Coleman. Those guys were players that could hit the outside and come back in. But more so, the 49ers had several players that had those abilities, which allowed them to keep defenses on the edge when incorporating other players, which not only kept players healthy, but also gave them one of the most prolific rushing attacks that year. With Christian McCaffrey, with when Elijah Mitchell comes back, which likely appears to be after the bye, the 49ers can now have that again. And that's why they don't have to worry about the amount of volume that they utilize the passing game on first down. They can go back to incorporating play action a lot more because it can be more effective when the running game is working to a greater degree. And so that's why I am happy with how or I'm at least happy with the move they made for McCaffrey and how it can probably increase the potential of this offense going forward.
1000%. When you look at when Mike Shanahan had Clinton Portis, um, they went 13-3 with Brian Greasy as quarterback. Okay. Um, when he had Terrell Davis, like I said, Terrell Davis was running for 2,000 yards a year. They won 2 Super Bowls with, again, John Elway only completing 60% of his passes. Okay. They were not a big downfield, like a big passing team when they won those Super Bowls. They had Terrell Davis. Kyle Shanahan has never had a running back as talented as Christian McCaffrey. You could see the glimpses of it early in the game. I mean, it wasn't like the offense was just opening up these huge holes and McCaffrey's getting 9-10 yards. You can see the potential that's there.
Yeah.
Christian McCaffrey, now you have the ability to add exactly what this whole offense is built around. And he can get you yards that aren't always there, that are blocked. He
Hmm.
can get you more yards than what are blocked. Jeff Wilson doesn't get you more than what's blocked. I would say McCaffrey is better than Arian Foster, CJ. Like, Arian Foster was good for a couple of years, but he did not have the explosion. Yeah, I know with the Texans. He had the explosion, but he didn't have the change of direction. He didn't have the vision that Christian McCaffrey has. You're talking about a guy. I would put him on par with a Marshall Faulk. You saw what Marshall Faulk did with the Rams when he came over. He was a thousand guy, and he took that offense into the stratosphere. He's Kyle Shanahan's version of Roger Craig, who was a thousand guy, and the offense was unstoppable. We're talking about a generational talent at running back, and like you say, there's no excuses for Jimmy. There's no excuses for Kyle going forward.
Right.
Um, you
Now
know,
that level of maybe you had some degree where you could have excuses in a way, not anymore. That window is gone. It now needs to come all together with that final piece added.
Yeah, the only grace I give is till after the bye week, because it's not like Christian McCaffrey has to get back in football shape. He has to get acclimated into the offense, which will take some time. But I mean, it's not that like it's not like Jimmy Ward coming back, who hasn't played football since training camp. It's not that kind of a situation where he has to get back in football shape. He was practicing during the week just with a different
Right.
team. He was been playing on the year, so there's going to be some timing things, learning playbook things. But I fully expect after the bye week, if Christian McCaffrey is ready to go and be running back number one, go forward, look out. I mean, I have a feeling, my suspicion is by Thanksgiving we're going to be singing a very different tune about the team.
I think that that's a fair statement and a great way to end this show on a positive note because that is true. The 49ers normally just in general haven't been a great October team under Kyle Shanahan. You've got the additional piece, you've got the bye week now to figure things out, incorporate McCaffrey more, and get this team back on track, not only health wise but also execution wise. But Johnny, I have to say it was a blast having you on the show today. The chat was great. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and thank you for obviously co-hosting this with me. It was a blast, man.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for reaching out. I sure appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, make sure you guys subscribe to Johnny, and also be sure to give me some love here as well. Trying to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark, but
Yes.
for those of you guys that don't know where he is, you can check out his Twitter in the description. He runs a great channel as well, covering film. So for those of you guys trying to get a little more acclimated with the NFL environment in terms of the film, he obviously always comes in with the sauce. But thank you guys so much. We will catch you guys next time.